things I asked you about is having heard the demos that were made before the album was done of most of the songs.
Yeah.
The arrangements were very intact, and you guys had been playing these songs, you knew them very well, but one of the things I asked you was what Roy Thomas Baker brought to the production and to bringing these songs to life that really made the record better.
Yeah. Well, I think, at the time, Roy was coming off Bohemian Rhapsody, and he had these massive background vocals. And the thing he really brought to our band that sounded different than our demos or our live shows were these huge background vocals. And he had a very unique way of recording it. Should I talk about that?
Please, yes.
He had a machine that there were only 4 of in the world. It was a 40-track machine on 2-inch tape.
Stevens.
John Stevens.
Yep.
It was a Stevens 40-track. And Roy would travel around the world recording Queen, Journey, Foreigner, in these, road trunks. The transport would be in one case,
Right.
and the meters would be in another. He'd put it all together, whatever country he was in. And so it was 40 tracks on 2-inch tape. And the thing about that is it allowed him, this was before you could link 2 24-track machines together and get extra tracks, certainly before digital. And so he got around that. Those massive background vocals required tons of tracks. So what he would do with the 40 track is have Benjamin, Greg, and myself on one mic singing, say, of a 3-part harmony, the bottom part, 7 or 8 times. And then he'd bounce that down to a stereo. Then the next harmony up, the 3rd or the 5th.
Wow.
And Ben, Greg, and myself sing that 7 or 8 times, 3 guys on one mic. And he'd bounce that down and wipe all those tracks off to have empty tracks. And then he'd record the high part, 7 or 8 times. So there's 3 guys recording 8 times on 3 tracks. It was massive. And he'd wipe all those tracks to open them up for
70s.
overdubs. And you couldn't really do that with one 24-track machine. There just weren't enough tracks.
Right.
So we had this custom-made machine, which made it really difficult in later years to remix a greatest hits record and try to find a 40-track machine.
Right.
Because you just, the tracks are so much narrower because of a 40 instead of 20. You'd sort of push up a track and have like guitar and a little bit of keyboard, So you had to get the 40 track. But it worked, he got those beautiful, those good times, all that stuff that you hear was that 40-track machine, and it all came from just massing vocals, bouncing them down, wiping them, putting more on, wiping them, putting the 3rd part, and that's how he got those gigantic background vocal sounds. And that was probably the biggest contribution he made to our sound, other than knowing how to record like drums and things to the best advantage on tape, and like tape saturation, so that the drums would compress on the tape, and he knew how to get that, and he knew how it would sound on the radio. He was brilliant at all that, and so that was part of it too. But he really worked that analog tape for all it was worth.
You described something too that happened during the sessions with basically what amounts to Roy more or less inventing triggering.
Yeah.
That?
Sure. Well, you guys know the song "Good Times Roll," and so it goes doom, doom, right? You know that part, that drum sound. And so on the bass, David had invested. It was early days for synthesizers. And David had invested in this system called Syndrums. Wasn't the E drum from EMU or anything like that. They were these little blue pads that plugged into a major, like a home board.
Right.
And they went boom, or boom, or beep, which you heard on like da-da-da-da-da-da. That was the Syndrums. Well, anyway, on the basic track of Good Times Roll, David was just hitting his regular rack tom-tom on his drums. Let the good times doom, doom. He was just hitting a drum. Roy had an idea, and he fed that drum track we used to mix on little Oratone speakers that would show you, where we'd check them on them to see what a car stereo would sound like back in those days. Little mono speaker called an Oratone.
Yep.
And Roy fed David's drum track through this little Oratone speaker, and he set it on its back facing up. Then he took the Syndrome pad, the little synthesizer drum, and put it on its face against the speaker, and fed that tom-tom track through the speaker. So every time it went doom, it triggered the Syndrome going doom, doom, and he recorded that.
That's
and threw away
amazing.
the tom-tom. And so that, he kind of invented triggering. And so that's how we got that sound.
Won't you let the